church. It is great to be here. Wow, what an exciting morning. Got up early, making plans to be here with plenty of time. Get a call on the way, like, where are you? Like, what do you mean, where am I? We start at 10. You got to be kidding me. No. But anyway, we made it, and that's a good thing. So, start out with a question today. Is everybody happy? Okay. You know, if I walked into my Chick-fil-A restaurant tomorrow morning, and I went in the kitchen and I said, is everybody happy? You know, the response would be an overwhelmingly, yeah, man, H-A-P-P-Y. Why do you think that is? Well, they got a great environment to work in. They got great teammates. They know they're appreciated. They get to eat for free. They get benefits. And man, look who they get to work for. You know, what more could you want? But you know, the old saying is, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. There's a lot of truth to that. But I ask the same thing for us here this morning. Why wouldn't we be happy? You know, if you think about that question this morning, why wouldn't we be happy here? After all, we're here to worship God. We're here to prepare ourselves for a one-way trip to heaven. We're here to get ready for that. So I ask you again, is everybody happy? Yes. Yeah, man, H-A-P-P-Y. You got it. But, you know, for some folks, you might ask, some folks in the world say, is heaven real? Is heaven real? And if so, how does one know? You know, in spite of all the bogus claims of people having left earth, died, and went to heaven for a visit, and then coming back, to my knowledge, no one has died, no one has gone to heaven and returned to earth to tell of the real experience there, you know? We all know that what we know about heaven is revealed to us in the Scriptures, and that's what we know, and that's what we trust in. You know, so it's a beautiful time of year. We've already had the Masters golf tournament. The flowers are blooming, the fish are biting, and I got my first granddaughter graduated Friday night. It's just been a great time. So, talking about the beauty of the world we live in today, I decided to approach the sermon of heaven. Because after all, when you think about the most beautiful thing that you can think of, what else would you think of besides heaven? I know you guys, you would think about your wives. That's a little pointer for you there, remember that. But what else would you think about? The most beautiful thing you can imagine, it would be the subject of heaven. I think it was back in maybe the 80s or 90s, Bud probably would know better. The brother Neil Pryor came to Lake City, I think it was in the old building, and he preached a sermon on heaven. And I have actually put my spin on that sermon. I can't recall exactly when it was, but if you're like me, you can't even remember what happened last week. If you're like me, you can't even remember what time church starts. So, you know, our memory is just not what it used to be, is it? Reminds me of an old story of three old ladies, sisters, lived together. They were 96, 94, and 92 years old. And they lived in a two-story house, and they were sitting at the table one night drinking tea. And the 96-year-old, she said, I think I'll get up and go draw me a bath. So she got up, went upstairs. Everything was going good. She put one foot in the tub, and she yelled down to her sisters, said, sisters, I can't remember if I were getting in the tub or getting out. And they yelled back to her. They said, that's okay, sister. I'm coming up to take care of you. We'll take care of you. So the 94-year-old got up from the table, and she started up the stairs to go see about her sister. She got halfway up the stairs, and she stopped. And she said, sister, I can't remember if I were going up the stairs or down the stairs. And the 92-year-old sister just sat there drinking her tea. And so anyway, she knocks on wood, and she says, I hope I don't ever get like those guys and forget everything. So she hollers at her sister. She said, I'll be right there as soon as I see who's at the door. So, you know, that's just the way our memory is as we get older. So we just have to deal with it. In Luke chapter 10, Jesus sent out the 70 on what we call the limited commission. And they came back all excited. And they said, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us in your name. And Jesus said there in verse 20, he said, nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. You know, I suppose it would be a great thing if we could perform miracles today, if we could do some of the things that they did back in the old Bible times, cast out devils, cast out demons, and this, that, and the other, but we can't do that. That age is past. But what the Bible does tell us is that we have something even far greater than that, and that is that our names are written in heaven. You know, like I said, this morning we're going to take a very quick look at heaven this morning. We're going to look at its beauty that not only is here now, but beauty that lasts all the way into eternity. And if you want to turn your Bibles to Revelation chapter 21, that's where we'll be most of the time if you want to follow along, because Revelation 21 gives us a fantastic view of heaven. Gives us the view that we really want to see, the view that we know we're going to go to one day. And John begins here and he says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." Now, I've got 8 things I want to point out in this lesson today. You know, most preachers have 3 points, and you go home, I have 8, but don't get scared. They're real quick. The first note is heaven is a new place. That's the first thing we want to notice. You ever notice the emphasis that is placed on new? Not only here on this earth, but in heaven. Even in the scriptures, there's an emphasis on new things. The Bible emphasizes new things. A new commandment, a new covenant, a new song. So there's a lot of emphasis on new. A lot of us here today, a lot of us in the world get excited over new things, don't we? A lot of us guys get excited over a new truck, a new boat. Amen? I know I do. Salesmen love to see me coming. You know, if I could come up with an air spray that smelled like a new car, I'd be a rich man, you know, because it seems to be the thing. And don't most of you women get excited over a new dress or a new outfit? Maybe a new pair of shoes. You know, us guys, we have a pair of black shoes and brown shoes. You women have 200 pairs of shoes in the closet, but you're always excited over that next pair, that new pair. The emphasis here is that heaven is not an old place. It is a new place. It's not a remodeled place. It's not a second-hand place. Heaven is a new place. Another emphasis of the new. Look at verse 5. "Then he who sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new." Another emphasis here on the newness. And when you think about it, the heaven and the earth as we know it today is not going to be here for many more years compared to the eternity, right? Not many more years at all. Look at we'll go to 2 Peter chapter 3, beginning with verse 10. And it reads, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the day of the Lord, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells." So heaven is going to be a new place, a new heaven and a new earth. The second thing we want to know about heaven, we want to note about heaven, is that heaven is going to be a beautiful place. John spent a lot of time in this chapter describing the beauty of heaven. But you know, one thing that helps us appreciate the beauty of heaven to come is to appreciate the beauty of the earth that we live on today. You know, we've all traveled a little bit. We've all gone to the mountains. We've gone to the plains. We've gone to the canyons. And we've seen the great beauty of this earth. And if you sit back and you think about it, God went to a lot of trouble to make this earth look as good as it does. You know, he could have made our eyes to see black and white, but he gave us the sensitivity of color. He could have made everything we eat to taste like fuel that you put in a vehicle, but he gave us the sensitivity of taste. He could have made everything taste like liver or oatmeal, couldn't he? But he gave us the sensitivity of taste, and now we can enjoy ice cream and cake and fried chicken, and I'm so excited that he did. He gave us ears to communicate with, sensitivity to hear the birds and the wildlife and the children in our lives. He wanted us to appreciate the beauty of this place that we're living here today. So now you know why heaven is so appealing to our senses here. It's a beautiful place, and God went to a lot of trouble here in the scriptures, especially here in chapter 21, to describe the indescribable to us, that it might appeal to us. In fact, as we come down to verse 9 of this chapter, one of the angels said to John, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls filled with the 7 plagues, last plagues, came to me and talked with me, saying, 'Come, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife.'" And then if you'll drop down to verses 18 maybe through 21, it describes heaven here. It says the construction of its wall was made of jasper. The city was like pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. And it goes on to describe the beauty of heaven here. You know, as you read through these verses, you're probably like me. I doubted that John really intended for us to take some of this stuff literally, right? I doubt it. Are streets really going to be made of gold? Gold is a soft metal as we know it. That would be kind of rough for driving cars on. Of course, I don't know if there are going to be any cars in heaven. Who knows? Gates made out of a pearl. A gate made out of a pearl. You know, that would be a big pearl for a gate. But man, that would be a huge oyster to get that pearl out of. But the power of God, everything's possible. But you know, the truth is, if the streets weren't gold, if the streets were asphalt, if the streets were dirt or lime rock, if the gates were wooden, it really doesn't matter. I still want to go there, don't you? Don't you still want to go? It's a beautiful place. But I believe here in the Scriptures, God is really trying to describe the indescribable. He's trying to get us to imagine the most beautiful place possible, because that's where He wants us to go. Now look back at verse 2. Here in verse 2 it says, "Then I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband." Guys, I'm going to ask you, have you ever seen an ugly bride? Don't answer that. I'll tell you, I haven't seen any ugly brides. I've seen a lot of homely looking girls, but I have never seen an ugly bride. Why? Because a bride is adorned. A bride is beautiful. She's just right. And that's why the descriptive word here in the Scriptures. Note number 3. In case you haven't noticed, heaven is going to be a place of sweet singing. Sweet singing. Always singing. In chapter 5, when the Lamb comes, they're singing. Back in chapter 14, verse 3, when it talks about the redeemed, they're singing. In chapter 15, verse 3, they're singing again. Every single time that we read in there, we see and we hear about all the singing that's going on in heaven. You see, when we get to heaven, we're not going to be partaking of the Lord's Supper. We're not going to be praying anymore. We're not going to be passing the collection plate anymore. Only one of the, what we call avenues of worship, will be remaining according to the Scriptures, and that's singing. Singing. You know, I'm not sure what all we're going to be doing when we get to heaven. Hopefully there'll be some good fishing up there, some golf, but there's definitely going to be some singing. You know, and I would say that if you don't like to sing, you might want to start practicing, getting ready, because there's going to be singing up there. If you don't like to sing, I don't know what else you'll do. Happy people sing, and heaven is definitely going to be a happy place. But the fourth thing we want to note about heaven is going to be a place of eternal happiness. Looking at Revelation 21:4, it says, "And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, no sorrow, no crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away." Now, I don't know about you, but I think for the most of us, not a day goes by that most of us don't have some type of pain, some type of depression, some type of heartache or headache in our lives. So if you think about that, can you imagine a place where you have no more sorrow? God wipes away all the tears from our eyes. It's kind of hard to imagine a place like that, thinking about the lives and the struggles that some of us have to go through from day to day, isn't it? But that's the kind of place it is. We live here on earth, and our family, our friends pass on. But can you imagine living in a place so beautiful as we've described, a place where you never have to say goodbye again? Never have to say goodbye again. No more death. Heaven is going to be a place of eternal happiness. The fifth note and one of the most exciting notes about heaven is that it's going to be a place of reunion. A place of reunion. You know, through the years, as I've studied, as I'm sure you have, and as I got ready to study for this lesson and listen to some tapes and prep for this lesson, I honestly believe that we're going to know each other in heaven. I honestly believe that. Every indication in the Bible, in the afterlife, is that we're going to know one another in heaven. Isaiah 14, the people recognized the king of Babylon when he came down in the shield. In Ezekiel chapter 32, Pharaoh recognized the people there in the grave when he joined them. In Luke 16, the rich man in Hades lifted up his eyes and sees Abraham from far off and Lazarus in his bosom. In Matthew 8, we will sit down at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the banquet of the redeemed. And if you didn't recognize them, how would you know you were sitting with them? All indications are that we're going to know each other. Now, I know some folks may argue the point. If we don't know each other, we may worry ourselves sick if any of our family members made it or not. You ever thought about that? But some people argue, well, if we know one another, we might miss a family member that didn't make it, and we'd be sad. But the truth is, I believe God can give us the power to remove any sadness. He's already said there'll be no tears, there'll be no sadness. He can give us the power to forget the things that make us sad. And I also believe that if it will enhance our being in heaven, that's what it's going to do. If knowing one another and being together and recognizing one another is going to enhance the joy of heaven, then He's going to make it possible. I know for me, one of the real joys of heaven will be the opportunity to be reunited with people we've known and loved in this world and meet people from the Bible that maybe we've never known before, people from this country, people from other countries that we've never met. You know, there's going to be Christians there from Texas and Alabama and Michigan and South Carolina and so on, maybe even one or two from California, I'm not sure. And then just to think, it'll be a big reunion with our family that we've known here on earth. You know, I don't know about you, but I got folks that I can't wait to see. You know, I can't wait to see my parents. I look over here on the right side expecting to see them there. They're not there. But, buddy, one day I'll get to see them again. Roy and Norma Jean, not over there where they're supposed to be. But one day we'll get to see them again. You know, suppose you could go to a paradise where you never had to work anymore. You had all the money that you wanted, all the money you could spend. The weather was perfect. You had freedom to go and do and as you please, as you wanted to. Wouldn't most of us want to go there? Absolutely. What a place. What a place. But what if you had to go alone and leave your family? You had to go by yourself. That was the stipulation. You had to go alone, go by yourself, and leave your family, never seeing them again. Would you still want to go to that paradise place? It would be rough. You know, Dottie goes off for 2 or 3 days, and I'm ready for her to come home, so I don't know what it would be like if she didn't come home. So I believe the joy of heaven will be enhanced from sharing it with those that we love here on earth. Heaven is home, and of course home we know is where the heart is. Heaven is going to be a reunion, and if there is no gold streets, no pearly gates, even if it were an old place and there were a few tears every now and then, you know, I still wouldn't want to miss it. I don't think any of us would. A chance to be reunited with my family and friends from Lake City that I've known through the years, from Lakeside where I'm at now. Can you imagine opportunities to be reunited with Brother Harold Herndon? Opportunities to be with Roy Dix again? Opportunities to be with Linda Cruz? That's what's waiting on us, folks. That's what's waiting on us. We can be together again. Can you imagine seeing your husband or your wife, your kids or your parents go off to the pearly gates and the Lord say to you, depart, you can't be with them? That would be tough. Depart, you cannot be with them. How can some people live their lives in such a way that if the Lord were to come back today, that they would be eternally separated from the ones that they love, knowing they can do something about it now, but refusing to do something about it. I don't know how people can live with themselves, but they do, and those are the folks that we're trying to reach. Note number 6, heaven is going to be a meeting of all the redeemed. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 11, the Jews viewed heaven as a great banquet feast. Can you imagine what it would be like to gather around that table and be there with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Noah and Paul and those folks that we've read about, studied about in the scriptures? That would be just an amazing time. Note number 7. I told you it wouldn't take long to get through 8 points. But note number 7, to top it all off, heaven is where God is going to be. Let me ask you a question. Can you imagine looking into the face of God? Looking into the face of God. No man has ever seen God or looked him in his face. But in heaven, the scriptures say we're going to see God. Revelation chapter 22, verse 4, 1 John 3, verse 2. We'll have that opportunity to see God one day. And while we're thinking about it, have you ever noticed the life that we live on today, the life that we live here on this earth, there's no permanence? No permanence in this life. You know, our kids grow up. What happens then? They move out. Loved ones die. Sickness occurs. Sometimes we have to change jobs. Sometimes we have to move. And the list goes on and on. About the time you get it all together, about the time you get where you're happy and satisfied, something happens to disturb that, right? Seems to always happen that way. Even all of our relationships are temporary. And I personally think that God intends it to be that way. He don't want us to get too comfortable with how life is here. Life is good. But if we got too comfortable with it, guess what would happen? We wouldn't want to leave it. You know what we have to ask ourselves this morning, if the Lord came back, would we be ready? Hope so. But would we be ready to go? You know, the answers that people give are unbelievable. Well, yeah, I guess so. Or maybe I could take a later bus or something, you know. But it's like, if the Lord came back today, would you be ready to go today? Thinking about everything that we've discussed. We become too attached to this world, and sometimes we just don't want to leave. If you think about it, even our bodies have a built-in obsolescence. You know, they're designed to wear out. Paul said, we know that if this earthly house of this tabernacle be dissolved, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, an eternal home to look forward to. How many of us walk around in our neighborhoods and our cities very cautious, especially at night in the bigger cities? You know, you have to really be careful. I'm not sure how it is in Lake City now, but I'm sure there's parts of town you want to be careful walking around in at night. I know it is over in Jacksonville. Can you imagine living in a land where you never have to be afraid, you never have to fear anything or anybody? Well, Revelation 21:25 says, and its gates shall not be shut at all by day, and there will be no night there. You see, back in the old times, cities used to have huge walls around them. And those walls were basically to protect folks. Basically, the gates were open during the day where people could come and go as they wanted to. But at dusk, those gates were locked in those cities to keep the criminals out, to keep the bad folks out. So, can you imagine living in a land where there's no gates, no fence, nothing, no fear whatsoever? You know, I would love to live in the country on about 100 acres, ride my four-wheeler all over the place, all over the woods, put deer feeders out, hunt, and this, that, and the other. But my wife, I'm going to tell you, she's not having any of that. She's a city slicker. She wants neighbors. She wants people around her. She's not even going to sleep with the windows open. I mean, it's pretty cityfied there. But how about our pains? We talked a little bit about our pains. Most of us go through struggles from day to day. You know, not too many days pass that some of us don't have pain in our bodies. And for some of us to make it from one day to the next is a pretty good accomplishment for a lot of folks. It really is. We know them. Can you imagine living in a land where there will be eternal youth, eternal health? We won't even need health insurance. Isn't that something? It's going to be great. And lastly, note number 8, heaven is going to be forever. Paul summed it up best in Romans 8:18 when he said, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us." But you know, the sad news is, unfortunately, everybody that talks about heaven is not going to go to heaven. You know, there's a lot of good people on this earth, but good people isn't a qualification for going to heaven, is it? Everybody that talks about heaven is not going to make it to heaven. Revelation 21:27 says, "But there shall by no means enter it anything that defiles or causes an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life." And I'll tell you another thing I figured out along the way and by studying this lesson. I don't believe God ever intended hell for human beings. I really don't. I believe hell was prepared for the devil and his angels, and that's what we find over in the 25th chapter of Matthew. Jesus told his disciples that he had gone to prepare for them a place, right? That's where he intended for human beings to go to heaven. And hopefully heaven has a mansion or even a one-room villa, I really don't care, with our name waiting on us there. You know what would be tragic? What would really be tragic if that heaven up there or that one-room villa were never occupied. Or if you think about it, the purpose of our reason being here on this earth is only to decide where we're going to spend eternity, right? And if we miss eternity, we've missed it all. If we miss heaven, we've really missed the whole purpose of living. That's the bottom line. Mark Twain once said, "The best 2 days of our lives are the days we were born and the days we discovered why we were born." The best 2 days. Now you know why. Because we were born to occupy one of those mansions in heaven. We were born to live a life that will reward us with a home in heaven. Matthew 16:26 says, "For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" And I would say this morning, if you don't get anything else out of this lesson but one thing, at least heed this verse, and that is, if we miss heaven, we've missed it all. Nothing else matters. Can you imagine the book of life being opened and the Lord saying, "I'm sorry, your name's not here"? The only thing I can say worse than that would be, "Oh, I'm sorry, I see your name was here, but it's been blotted out." That would be terrible, wouldn't it? I know some of you aren't big planners. There's a lot of people in this world that aren't. But if there's one thing in life, you ought to plan to do, and that is, you should plan to go to heaven. You know, going to heaven is not going to be a happen so. It's just not going to happen all of a sudden. You have to plan to go to heaven. You have to plan to live your life according to God's word to go to heaven. So if there's one piece of planning that we want to do, we want to plan to go to heaven. You know, if the Lord came back right now, right this minute, as we examine our own lives, would our names be written there? Would your name be written there? Would my name be written there? You know, the question I'd ask each one of us, including myself this morning, is, how do I stand? How do you stand? Are you in the right condition to be with your family? Are you in the right condition to be with your loved ones if you were suddenly called home this morning? You see, lost means forever. Lost means forever, and I really think that's more than one soul can stand. You know, if being lost were only for 25 years or 50 years, we might could make it, you know. We might could make it short term, 25, 50 years, 100 years. But lost is forever. It's for eternity. Eternity away from those we love, eternity away from God. I think it's just a lot to think about. And it's easy for us to be prepared to make sure that our name is written there. Folks, if you're subject to the Lord's invitation, if we can help you in any way, I know most of you probably are Christians, but there may be some obstacles in your walk that you need to repent of, to get ready, to make sure your name's there, to make sure you're up there with those you love and care about. And if you never accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, there's no better time to do it than now. Because, you know, usually when somebody, they say when you start preaching about heaven, you can tell a preacher's getting old. But let me tell you something. I watch the news every single day, and I see where 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds are tragically killed in one form or another. So it's just not old people. It's young people. It's all of us. We never know when our name is going to be called. And when our name is called, don't we want to make sure that we're called home to be with God for all eternity? If we can help you in any way, we invite you to come forward while together we stand and sing.